The day Major Omar Bradley's plan brought down the alien empire part. One Major Omar Bradley stood at the observation deck of Lunar Base Alpha, his eyes fixed on the approaching lights in the darkness of space. They had first appeared 3 days ago, 7 massive objects moving in perfect formation toward Earth. The world's governments had been in constant emergency meetings since their detection. "Major, we're receiving a transmission from command," said Peter Garcia, his communications specialist. The young man's face was pale under the blue glow of his monitor. Bradley nodded and moved to the central console. Colonel Frank Weber's face appeared on screen, the lines around his eyes deeper than Bradley remembered from their last video call. "Major Bradley, I assume you're watching our visitors?" "Yes, sir. Any word on who they are?" Weber sighed. "They've made contact. Call themselves the Vekrai. They're requesting a diplomatic meeting in Geneva tomorrow. I'm sending you the transmission." They broadcast globally an hour ago. The screen changed to show a humanoid figure with pale blue skin and large black eyes. Its features were almost human-like, but with subtle differences that made Bradley's skin crawl. The creature spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth, we are the Vekrai Empire. We come in peace and seek friendship between our worlds. We request a meeting with your leaders to discuss cultural exchange and technological cooperation." The message ended, and Weber's face returned. "Something doesn't feel right, Colonel," Bradley said quietly. "Your paranoia is noted, Bradley," Weber replied, with a hint of irritation. "But this is a first contact situation. We follow protocol. The President and other world leaders will meet with them tomorrow. Your orders are to maintain your position and continue monitoring from the lunar base." After the call ended, Bradley turned to his small team. Besides Garcia, there was engineer Susan Hayes adjusting equipment in the corner and Dr. Elaine Murphy, the NASA scientist who had been studying unusual radiation patterns from the alien ships. "What do you think, Elaine?" Bradley asked. Murphy tucked a strand of red hair behind her ear. "Their ships are emitting energy signatures unlike anything I've ever seen. The pattern suggests they're scanning everything, our satellites, communications, defense systems." "That doesn't sound like friendly visitors," Hayes commented without looking up from her work. Bradley walked back to the window. "No, it doesn't." The next day, they watched the live broadcast from Geneva. World leaders gathered in the United Nations building to welcome the Vekrai representatives. Everything seemed normal until the Vekrai ambassador raised his hand during the opening speeches. Pulse of blue light erupted from his palm, and the broadcast suddenly cut out. "What just happened?" Garcia shouted, frantically working his controls. "All satellite communications with Earth just went dead." Emergency screens lit up across the command center. Hayes rushed to her station. "Major, I'm detecting massive energy surges all over Earth." "Something's happening in every major city." Bradley tried to reach command but got nothing but static. Then the lunar base proximity alarms began to blare. "Smaller craft just launched from the motherships," Murphy reported, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Hundreds of them heading toward Earth's surface." For the next terrifying hours, they could only watch helplessly as the invasion unfolded. The Vekrai had disabled Earth's satellite networks and communication systems in one coordinated strike. Their smaller ships descended on major cities across the globe. Occasional emergency broadcasts showed scenes of chaos, alien troops with advanced weapons rounding up humans, strange devices being installed in city centers. "They played us," Bradley said, his fists clenched at his sides. The peaceful contact was just to get close enough for a surprise attack. By nightfall, most major Earth cities appeared to be under Vekrai control. The lunar base, small and relatively hidden, had somehow escaped notice, for now. "We need to go dark," Bradley ordered. "Shut down all non-essential systems. Minimal, power only. No transmissions unless absolutely necessary." "But what about rescue?" Hayes asked. "There must be military responses happening." Bradley shook his head. "Did you see those weapons? That technology is centuries beyond ours. This isn't a battle, it's a slaughter." "So we just hide?" Garcia asked. "No," Bradley said firmly. "We survive, we watch, and we look for weaknesses. Every enemy has them. Days turned into weeks as they carefully observed the HFY operations on Earth. Murphy focused on intercepting and decoding alien communications, while Hayes worked on modifying their equipment to better monitor the invaders. Garcia maintained what little contact they could risk with surviving human resistance groups that had gone underground. 1 month after the invasion, Murphy burst into Bradley's quarters in the middle of the night. "I found something," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "In their communications. There's a pattern I didn't see before." Bradley followed her to the lab where she had charts and diagrams spread across multiple screens. "Look at these transmission patterns," she said, pointing to wave formations on her monitor. "Every ship, every soldier, they're all constantly sending and receiving signals to the largest vessel, what we've been calling their flagship." Bradley studied the diagrams. "They're reporting in?" "It's more than that," Murphy explained. I think they're all connected to some kind of central system, like a neural network. None of them act independently. Everything is coordinated through that main ship." Bradley's mind raced with possibilities. A centralized command structure, efficient but potentially vulnerable, Murphy finished for him. "If we could somehow disrupt that network, we might have a chance," Bradley said, a small spark of hope igniting for the first time since the invasion. The next morning, they called a meeting with the entire lunar base crew, all 7 of them. As Bradley explained Murphy's discovery, a plan began to form. "We need more information," he said. "And we need to contact any resistance groups on Earth. If this network is their strength, we'll make it their weakness." As they talked, the main screen suddenly flashed with an incoming transmission, the first directed specifically at them since the invasion. Bradley hesitated, then nodded to Garcia to accept it. The screen showed a battered military transport ship approaching the lunar base. "Lunar Base Alpha, this is Captain Leroy Johnson, United States Army," came a strained voice over the comm. "Request emergency docking. I have wounded and critical intelligence about the enemy." Bradley looked at his team, then back at the approaching ship. "This could be a trap," he warned. "Or it could be exactly what we need," Murphy countered. Bradley took a deep breath and made his decision. "Prepare for docking, and prepare your sidearms just in case." As the airlock cycled open, Bradley stood ready, weapon in hand. The door slid aside to reveal 3 exhausted soldiers in torn uniforms. Their leader, a tall man with dark skin and determined eyes, stepped forward. "Major Bradley, I'm Leroy Johnson, and I think I might know how we can hurt these alien bastards." The day Major Omar Bradley's plan brought down the alien empire part. Captain Leroy Johnson and his 2 soldiers sat in the lunar base conference room. They looked tired and thin. Their uniforms were dirty and torn. Johnson drank his 3rd cup of water while Bradley and his team waited for him to speak. "We've been hiding for 3 months, Johnson finally said, moving from place to place. "The HFY control all major cities now. They're using humans for work and taking our resources." "How did you get here?" Bradley asked. Johnson smiled for the first time. "We stole one of their scout ships. A small group of us attacked a landing site near what used to be Fort Bragg. Most of my team died in the fight, but we got the ship." "You learned to fly it?" Murphy asked, impressed. "The controls are strange but similar enough to our aircraft. We figured it out," Johnson said. "But that's not the important part. We found something while escaping Earth." He pulled out a small metal device and placed it on the table. It looked like a smooth silver tablet with strange symbols on its surface. "This is a HFY communication device. We took it from an officer we killed. For weeks we couldn't make sense of it, but then we found someone who could." "Who?" Bradley asked. "Dr. Amanda Ross. She was a computer scientist at MIT before the invasion. The HFY took her to work on their communication systems. We rescued her during a transfer between facilities." Hayes leaned forward. "Where is she now?" "Still on Earth, hidden with the resistance in the Chicago ruins. She couldn't make the trip because of her leg injury, but she sent this." Johnson tapped the device and it lit up with strange patterns. She decoded some of their messages. The HFY are planning something big. They call it processing. They're going to start with North America in 2 weeks. Processing? Garcia asked. We don't know exactly, but from what Dr. Ross could understand, it involves removing all useful materials from the region. All of them, including the people. The room fell silent as they processed this information. We need to get Dr. Ross here, Bradley finally said. She might be the key to understanding their network better. Murphy nodded in agreement. If she can decode their communications, she might help us find a way to disrupt their central system. The scout ship is still functional, Johnson said. We could go back. Bradley stood up and walked to the window. Earth hung in the distance, beautiful and blue despite the alien ships surrounding it. It's risky, he said. But we don't have a choice. Johnson, how many people can that scout ship carry? 6, maybe 7 if we squeeze. Bradley turned to face his team. I need 3 volunteers to come with me and Johnson back to Earth. Every hand in the room went up. Bradley looked at them with pride, then pointed to Murphy and Hayes. Elaine, I need your expertise on their communication systems. Susan, your engineering skills will be essential if the ship has any problems. He looked at Garcia. Peter, you, stay here with Johnson's soldiers. Keep the base running and keep monitoring their transmissions. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Johnson taught them the basics of the alien ship's controls. Hayes made some modifications to improve its stealth capabilities. Murphy studied the communication device, trying to understand as much as possible before meeting Dr. Ross. The night before their departure, Bradley couldn't sleep. He stood at the observation window, looking at the stars. Colonel Weber's face appeared in his mind. His commanding officer had been in Geneva during the attack. Bradley wondered if he was still alive. Can't sleep? Murphy asked, joining him at the window. Bradley shook his head, thinking about what we're about to do. It's crazy, she said with a small smile. 4 people in a stolen alien ship trying to save the world. When you put it that way, it sounds impossible. The best plans usually do. She touched his arm gently. You should get some rest, Major. The next morning, they boarded the scout ship. It was cramped inside with strange controls and an odd smell. Johnson took the pilot's seat, with Hayes beside him. Bradley and Murphy sat in what looked like passenger seats. Remember, we fly like we belong there, Johnson said as they launched from the lunar base. These smaller ships come and go from Earth all the time. As long as we follow their flight patterns, we should blend in. The journey to Earth took several hours. As they approached the atmosphere, they saw dozens of HFY ships moving in organized patterns. Large structures had been built in orbit, connected to the motherships by energy beams. Those weren't there when we left, Johnson said quietly. They followed a group of scout ships entering the atmosphere, trying to mimic their movements exactly. No one spoke as they descended through clouds and approached what used to be the American Midwest. Chicago came into view. The once great city was now dominated by alien structures. Tall, spiral towers rose among the skyscrapers. Strange energy fields covered whole sections of the city. The research facility is there. Johnson pointed to a dome-shaped building near the lake. That's where they're keeping Dr. Ross. They landed at a small HFY outpost several miles from the city. As soon as they touched down, Johnson activated a device that filled the ship with mist. Camouflage spray, he explained. It will mask our human scent and give us the right heat signature to fool their sensors. Won't last long, though. They exited, the ship wearing stolen HFY worker uniforms over their own clothes. The alien outpost was mostly automated, with only a few HFY guards patrolling. They moved quickly through shadows until they reached a transport vehicle. Can you drive this? Bradley asked Hayes. She studied the controls for a moment. I think so. It's not that different from the ship. They boarded the vehicle and Hayes started it up. The engine made a humming sound as they moved toward Chicago. On the road, they passed HFY soldiers leading groups of human workers. The people looked thin and tired, their faces empty of hope. 3 months, Murphy whispered. Just 3. Months, and this is what's happened. Bradley touched her shoulder. That's why we're here. To stop this. As they approached the research facility, Johnson pointed to a small entrance on the side. Service door. Less security. Hayes parked the vehicle in a loading area. They waited until the HFY workers moved away, then quickly made their way to the door. Johnson used a stolen access card to get them inside. The interior was cold and sterile. They moved through corridors, hiding whenever HFY soldiers passed by. Johnson led them deeper into the facility until they reached a section with small, cell-like rooms. "She's in cell 27, Johnson whispered. They found the room and opened it. Inside was a woman with short gray hair sitting on a bed. She looked up. In surprise, then relief flooded her face when she recognized Johnson. "You came back," she said, standing up. She had a makeshift splint on her right leg. "Dr. Ross," Johnson said. "We need your help. This is Major Bradley from Lunar Base Alpha." Bradley stepped forward. "Doctor, we believe you might be the key to finding a weakness in the HFY network." Before she could answer, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. "We've been discovered," Hayes said, looking at her scanner. "Guards coming from both directions." Bradley drew his weapon. "New plan. We fight our way out." The day Major Omar Bradley's plan brought down the alien empire part. 3. The alarms echoed through the hallways of the research facility. Bradley looked both ways down the corridor and made a quick decision. "This way," he said, pointing to the right. "Johnson, help Dr. Ross. Hayes, take the rear. Murphy, stay close to me." They moved as fast as they could with Dr. Ross limping between Johnson and Hayes. Bradley led them through the maze of corridors, trying to remember the path they had taken to get in. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder behind them. "HFY, soldiers coming," Hayes warned, looking back. They reached an intersection and saw 5 HFY soldiers approaching from the front. They were tall, blue-skinned creatures in silver armor, carrying weapons that glowed with strange energy. "Back," Bradley ordered. "Find another way." They turned down a different hallway, but more soldiers appeared at the far end. They were being surrounded. "In here," Murphy said, pointing to a small door. She pushed it open and they rushed inside. It was a laboratory filled with computers and strange devices. The walls were covered with screens showing maps and diagrams. There was a large table in the center with what looked like a 3D model of Chicago. "This is the command center for this sector," Dr. Ross said, looking around with wide eyes. "I've never been allowed in here." Bradley locked the door behind them, but it wouldn't hold for long. "Look for another exit," he ordered. As the others searched the room, Murphy moved to one of the computers. "This might have information we can use," she said, her fingers moving quickly over the strange keyboard. Dr. Ross joined her. "I can read some of their language now, let me help." The door shook as something heavy hit it from the outside. Bradley and Johnson took positions on either side, weapons ready. "Hurry," Bradley called to Murphy and Dr. Ross. "I'm downloading their files to this," Murphy said, holding up a small device. "It might tell us more about their network." The door shook again, harder this time. A small crack appeared in the metal. "Hayes, any luck finding an exit?" Bradley asked. "Nothing yet," Hayes replied, searching the walls. Then she stopped and looked up. "Wait, there's a maintenance shaft above us." She pulled a chair under an air vent in the ceiling and climbed up. Using a tool from her belt, she quickly removed the cover of the vent. "It's big enough," she said. "We can fit through." The door cracked open an inch as the HFY soldiers pushed against it. Bradley fired his weapon through the gap and alien screams came from the other side. "Everyone up now," he ordered. Hayes went first, then helped pull Dr. Ross up into the shaft. Murphy finished her download and climbed up next, followed by Johnson. "Major, come on," Hayes called down. Bradley fired once more through the crack in the door, then ran to the chair. Just as he started to climb, the door burst open, and HFY soldiers poured into the room. He jumped, grabbing Hayes' outstretched hand as energy blasts hit the wall around him. Hayes and Johnson pulled him up into the shaft. They replaced the vent cover and started crawling through the dark, narrow space. They could hear the HFY soldiers below searching the room and calling for backup. "Which way?" Bradley whispered. The building schematics showed a loading dock on the east side, Murphy said. If we keep going straight, we should reach it. They crawled for what seemed like hours, taking turns helping Dr. Ross move with her injured leg. Finally, Hayes, who was in the lead, stopped. I see light ahead, she whispered back to them. They reached another vent cover. Hayes carefully peered through it and saw a large room filled with crates and vehicles. It was the loading dock, but it was full of Vecri workers and soldiers. There are too many of them, she said. We'll never make it across. Dr. Ross moved forward to look. Wait, she said. See those containers by the far wall? They're explosive materials for mining operations. If we could create a diversion... Bradley nodded. Good thinking. Johnson, do you still have those small charges you showed us? Johnson pulled 2 small devices from his pocket. Just these. We'll need to place them on those containers, Bradley said. It could give us enough time to reach our transport vehicle. I'll go, Hayes volunteered. I'm the smallest and fastest. Bradley wanted to argue but knew she was right. Be careful. Place the charges, then get back here. We'll wait for your signal. Hayes took the charges from Johnson and carefully removed the vent cover. She slipped down into a narrow space between stacked crates, hidden from view of the Vecri, in the main area. The others watched nervously as she moved silently from shadow to shadow, making her way toward the explosive containers. She was almost there when a Vecri worker turned and walked toward her position. Hayes froze, pressing herself against a crate. The alien passed within inches of her but didn't notice her. Once it moved away, she quickly placed the charges on the containers and set the timer for 2 minutes. She made her way back to the vent and was helped up by Johnson. 2 minutes, she whispered. Everyone get ready, Bradley said. When the explosion happens, we go straight for the exit and then to our vehicle. They waited, tense and silent. Then a massive boom shook the entire building. Fire and smoke filled the loading dock as the Vecri ran in panic toward the explosion. Now, Bradley said. They dropped down from the vent and ran toward the exit, staying close to the wall. In the chaos, none of the aliens noticed them. They made it outside and sprinted toward their transport vehicle. Hayes jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The others piled in, and they sped away from the facility as more explosions followed the first. Alarms were blaring across the entire complex. Head for the outpost where we left the ship, Bradley ordered. As they drove through the ruined streets of Chicago, they passed more human workers. The people looked up at the sound of the explosions, some with a small spark of hope in their eyes for the first time in months. They reached the outpost without being followed and quickly boarded their stolen scout ship. Hayes and Johnson prepared for takeoff while Bradley helped Dr. Ross to a seat. We did it, Murphy said, almost in disbelief. We actually got her out. But as Johnson started the launch sequence, the ship's communication system suddenly came to life. A familiar voice filled the cabin. This is Colonel Frank Weber of Earth Resistance Network. To any human forces receiving this message, the Vecri are accelerating their timeline. Processing begins tomorrow. I repeat, processing begins tomorrow. If anyone can hear this, remember Thermopylae. Bradley stared at the communication unit in shock. Weber is alive, he whispered. What's Thermopylae? Murphy asked. It was a project we worked on years ago, Bradley said, his mind racing. A defensive system designed to counter alien technology, based on artifacts recovered from a crash site. Doctor, Ross looked at him with new interest. You have technology that can fight the Vecri? Possibly, Bradley said, if it still exists. But first we need to get back to the lunar base. The ship rose into the air as Vecri alarm systems activated across the region. Johnson piloted them skillfully through the atmosphere, avoiding detection by staying in the shadow of larger Vecri vessels. As Earth grew smaller below them and the lunar base came into view, Bradley felt a new sense of purpose. With Dr. Ross's knowledge of the Vecri systems and the Thermopylae project, they might actually have a chance to fight back. Lunar Base Alpha, this is Major Bradley, he said into the communication system. Mission accomplished, and we may have just found a way to bring down an empire. The day Major Omar Bradley's plan brought down the alien empire part. For back at Lunar Base Alpha, Dr. Ross sat in the main conference room with Bradley's team. Her leg was properly treated now, and she looked much better after a hot shower and clean clothes. She studied the data Murphy had downloaded from the HFY facility. "This confirms what I suspected," she said, pointing to diagrams on the screen. "The HFY operate as a hive mind. Every soldier, worker, and ship is connected to a central command system on their flagship." "The Emperor's will," Bradley said, using the name they had heard in HFY communications. "Yes," Dr. Ross nodded. "It's their most protected vessel. Inside is a quantum supercomputer they call the hive mind. It controls everything through quantum entanglement." "Quantum entanglement?" Garcia asked. "Like linked particles?" "Exactly," Dr. Ross explained. "When two particles are entangled, what happens to one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. The HFY have mastered this technology. Every soldier has quantum particles in their armor that are entangled with the hive mind." Bradley leaned forward. "So that's how they coordinate so perfectly. They're all receiving orders instantly from the central computer." "But it's more than that," Dr. Ross continued. "This connection is so deep that without it, they can barely function. From what I learned while working in their facility, if the connection to the hive mind is broken, their systems fail, and their biological forms enter a hibernation state." Murphy's eyes widened. "So if we could somehow disrupt the hive mind, we could disable the entire invasion force at once," Bradley finished. Hayes shook her head. "But how? The flagship is the most heavily defended ship in their fleet." Bradley stood up and walked to a computer terminal. "Colonel Weber's message mentioned Thermopylae. That might be our answer." He typed in a series of codes, accessing classified military files. The screen filled with information about Project Thermopylae, a secret program started after a small alien ship crashed in New Mexico decades earlier. "After the crash, our scientists reverse-engineered some of the alien technology," Bradley explained. "They created a virus designed to infiltrate and disrupt alien systems. It was never used because we never faced an alien invasion until now." "Does this virus still exist?" Johnson asked. "The files should be stored at a secure facility in Colorado," Bradley said. "If it hasn't been destroyed or captured by the HFY." Dr. Ross studied the technical specifications on the screen. "This is impressive, but it's designed for the technology from that crashed ship. The HFY systems are different. We would need to modify it." Murphy nodded. "I can help with that. Between your knowledge of their systems and my expertise, we might be able to adapt it." "But first we need to get the virus," Bradley said. "And we need a way to deliver it to the hive mind." They spent the next few hours making plans. The secure facility in Colorado was deep underground, so there was a chance it had survived the invasion. The problem was getting there, retrieving the virus, and then somehow accessing the HFY flagship. "We need more help," Bradley finally said. "We can't do this with just the 7 of us." "The Earth Resistance Network," Johnson suggested. "If Weber is alive and organizing them, they could create diversions to help us get to Colorado. And we'll need more ships," Hayes added. "Something bigger than a scout ship if we're going to approach the flagship." Bradley nodded. "We'll need to contact Weber first. Garcia, can you boost our communication signal enough to reach Earth without the HFY detecting it?" Garcia thought for a moment. "Maybe. If we piggyback on their own communication frequencies and encrypt our message, they might not notice." "Do it," Bradley ordered. "Johnson, help him. Murphy and Dr. Ross start working on how to modify the virus once we have it. Hayes, you and I will plan the mission to Colorado." Everyone set to work with renewed energy. For the first time since the invasion, they had a real plan, not just to survive but to fight back. 2 days later, Garcia and Johnson had a communication system ready. They aimed it at the last known location of Weber's transmission and sent a simple encrypted message. "Thermopylae is the key. Need coordinates for rendezvous." Hours passed with no response. Bradley was about to order them to try again when the system beeped. A message appeared on the screen. Lunar Base Alpha? Bradley, is that you? This is Weber. Sending coordinates now. Come at night. Bring weapons. Bradley felt a surge of relief and excitement. We have a chance, he said to Hayes as they studied maps of Colorado. A real chance, if we can get the virus, she reminded him. And if Dr. Ross and Murphy can modify it. And if we can somehow get it into the hive mind. One step at a time, Bradley said with a small smile. First, we go back to Earth. They prepared a larger mission this time. Bradley would lead a team including Hayes, Johnson, and 2 others to the surface. Murphy, Dr. Ross, and Garcia would stay at the lunar base to work on the virus modifications. The night before they were to leave, Bradley couldn't sleep again. He found Murphy in the lab working late. You should rest, he told her. So should you, she replied without looking up from her work. Bradley sat down beside her. Do you think this can really work? Murphy finally stopped and turned to him. Honestly, it's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have. Bradley nodded. If we fail, then we try something else, Murphy said firmly. But we won't fail. We can't. She hesitated, then reached out and touched his hand. Be careful down there, Omar. It was the first time she had used his first name. He squeezed her hand gently. I will. The next day, they launched the scout ship and headed back to Earth. They followed Weber's coordinates to a remote area in the Rocky Mountains. As they approached, they saw no signs of Vecri activity. The aliens seemed to have little interest in uninhabited areas. They landed in a clearing and waited, weapons ready. After a few minutes, figures emerged from the trees. At the front was Colonel Frank Weber, thinner and grayer than Bradley remembered, but very much alive. Major Bradley, Weber said with a tired smile. Good to see you didn't get yourself killed. Same to you, sir, Bradley replied, shaking his hand. Weber looked at the small team. Is this all you brought? There are more at the lunar base, Bradley explained. We're here for Thermopylae. Weber's face grew serious. I figured as much when I heard your transmission. The facility is still secure as far as we know. The Vecri never found it, but getting there won't be easy. Denver is under heavy patrol. We have a plan, Bradley said, but we'll need your help. Weber gestured to the people behind him, about 20 men and women in mismatched military uniforms and civilian clothes, all armed and battle-worn. This is what's left of the Colorado resistance, Weber said. Not much, but they're good fighters. And we're not alone. There are resistance cells across the country, all waiting for a chance to strike back. Bradley looked at the determined faces around him. Then let's give them that chance. Tomorrow we go after Thermopylae, and then we take down an empire. The day Major Omar Bradley's plan brought down the alien empire part. The underground facility was dark and cold when Bradley, Weber, and their team entered. They had fought their way through a small Vecri patrol outside Denver, losing 2 resistance fighters in the process. Now they stood in the main computer room of the secret base looking for Project Thermopylae. It should be in the central database, Weber said, typing commands into an old computer terminal. The power was still working thanks to the facility's independent generators. After several minutes, the screen lit up with files labeled Thermopylae. Weber downloaded them onto a secure drive. Got it, he said. Now we need to get this back to your lunar base so Dr. Ross and Murphy can modify it. They made their way back to the surface and returned to their hidden scout ship. The journey back to space was tense, as Vecri patrols had increased since their last trip. Johnson used all his piloting skills to avoid detection, flying through storm clouds and staying close to mountains until they could make their ascent. Once back at Lunar Base Alpha, Weber met with Dr. Ross and Murphy. They immediately began working on the Thermopylae virus, adapting it to target the Vecri hive mind. The original virus was designed to disrupt navigation and weapon systems, Murphy explained to Bradley as they watched the scientists work. But we're modifying it to attack the quantum entanglement network itself. For 3 days they worked without stopping. Everyone knew time was running out. According to the data they had gathered, the Vecri processing of North America had already begun. Cities were being systematically stripped of resources and millions of humans were being moved to processing centers. Finally, Dr. Ross called everyone to the conference room. "It's ready," she said, holding up a small device. "We've modified the Thermopylae virus to target the Vecrai quantum network. Once uploaded to the hive mind, it will create a feedback loop in their entanglement system." "What will that do?" Hayes asked. "In simple terms, it will cause their entire network to collapse," Murphy explained. "Every connected Vecrai ship, soldier, and system should shut down simultaneously." "But there's a catch," Dr. Ross added. "We need to physically connect this device to a terminal on the flagship. It can't be transmitted wirelessly." The room fell, silent as everyone realized what this meant. Someone would have to board the Emperor's Will, the most heavily guarded Vecrai ship in orbit. "We need a plan," Bradley said. "A way to get onto that ship." Weber stood up. "I have an idea. The Resistance has been gathering information about Vecrai patrol patterns. There's a scheduled rotation of ships docking with the flagship for maintenance, every 12 hours. If we could disguise ourselves as a maintenance crew, we'd still need a distraction," Johnson pointed out. "Something big enough to draw attention away from us." Hayes nodded. "And we'd need to coordinate with ground forces to make it believable." Bradley thought for a moment, then turned to Garcia. "Can you contact all Resistance cells on Earth at once?" Garcia considered it. "With our enhanced communication system, maybe. It would be risky. The Vecrai might detect it." "Take that risk," Bradley ordered. "We need every Resistance fighter around the world to attack Vecrai positions simultaneously. It needs to be big enough that they can't ignore it." For the next 2 days, they planned their attack. Garcia worked to establish secure communications with Resistance leaders worldwide. Bradley, Weber, and Johnson prepared to infiltrate the flagship. Dr. Ross and Murphy made final adjustments to the virus. Hayes modified their scout ship to look like a Vecrai maintenance vessel. On the day of the mission, Bradley stood before his team one last time. "This is our only chance," he said. "If we fail, Earth is lost. If we succeed, we free our world." The scout ship launched from the lunar base with Bradley, Weber, Johnson, Hayes, and Murphy on board. They had decided Murphy should come to help with any technical issues that might arise with the virus. They wore stolen Vecrai worker uniforms and carried the small device containing Thermopylae. As they approached Earth orbit, Garcia's voice came over the radio. "All Resistance cells are in position, awaiting your signal." Bradley took a deep breath. "Tell them to begin." Across the planet, humans launched attacks on Vecrai positions. In what remained of New York, Resistance fighters blew up a processing center. In London, they attacked a Vecrai ground transport. In Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, and dozens of other cities, similar attacks happened at the exact same time. On the Vecrai communication channels they were monitoring, they could hear confusion and alarm. Orders were being issued rapidly as the Vecrai tried to respond to attacks happening everywhere at once. "It's working," Hayes said as she piloted their disguised ship toward the flagship. "They're diverting ships to the surface." They approached the massive Emperor's Will, its dark hull stretching for miles. Following the path of other maintenance vessels, Hayes guided them into a docking bay. They exited their ship, moving with purpose like Vecrai workers. The few actual Vecrai in the bay were too busy with emergency communications to pay them much attention. Bradley led them through corridors based on schematics Dr. Ross had provided. They needed to reach the central command center where the hive mind was located. They were nearly there when alarm systems activated. A voice echoed through the ship in the strange Vecrai language. "They're starting a security lockdown." Murphy translated. "They must have realized something's wrong." "Run," Bradley ordered. They sprinted through the corridors, no longer trying to blend in. Vecrai soldiers appeared ahead, weapons raised. Weber and Johnson fired back, creating cover as Bradley, Murphy, and Hayes pushed forward. They reached a sealed door, the entrance to the command center. Hayes quickly attached a device to the control panel, overriding the security system. The door slid open. Inside was a vast room filled with strange technology. In the center stood a glowing column of light, the hive mind, and beside it stood a figure larger than the other Vekrai wearing ornate armor. "The Emperor," Murphy whispered. The Vekrai Emperor turned toward them, eyes narrowing. He spoke, his voice deep and menacing. "He's asking who dares enter his presence," Murphy translated. Bradley stepped forward. "Tell him we're the people whose world he invaded, and we've come to take it back." As Murphy translated, the Emperor laughed. He raised a weapon, but Bradley was faster. He fired, hitting the Emperor's arm. The alien roared in pain as Weber and Johnson entered the room, firing at other Vekrai officials. "Murphy, the virus!" Bradley shouted as he engaged the Emperor in combat. Murphy ran to a terminal near the glowing column, haze covering her. She connected the device containing Thermopylae and began the upload. The Emperor knocked Bradley down with a powerful blow. As the alien raised his weapon for a killing strike, Weber fired, hitting the Emperor in the chest. The massive alien staggered back but didn't fall. "The virus is at 50%, Murphy called out. "We just need a little more time." The ship shuddered as something hit it from outside. The resistance attacks must have escalated. "Percent," Murphy said as haze fired at Vekrai soldiers entering the room. The Emperor recovered and charged toward Murphy, realizing what she was doing. Bradley and Weber fired together, finally bringing the massive alien down. 100%, Murphy shouted. "It's done." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the glowing column began to pulse erratically. The lights in the room flickered. The remaining Vekrai soldiers suddenly froze, then collapsed to the ground. "It's working," Hayes said in amazement. They ran back to their ship as the flagship began to shake violently. All around them, Vekrai soldiers lay motionless. Their systems were failing as the quantum entanglement network collapsed. They launched, just as explosions began rippling through the Emperor's will. From space, they watched as the massive ship broke apart. All across Earth's orbit, other Vekrai vessels were drifting powerless or exploding as their systems failed. On Earth, reports came in from resistance fighters worldwide. Vekrai soldiers were collapsing, their ships falling from the sky. The war invasion force had been crippled in a single stroke. Bradley looked at his team, tired but triumphant. "We did it," he said simply. "We took back our world." As they flew back to Earth, Bradley knew the fight wasn't completely over. There would be cleanup, rebuilding, and recovery. But humanity had proven something important, not just to the Vekrai, but to the galaxy at large. Never underestimate a species willing to fight for its home.